Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to this scintillating session on financial aid. We really appreciate you coming. My name's Steve Bjork, and I am the outgoing college counselor, but still here at St. Thomas Academy. Norma Gutierrez is my lovely replacement. And also here is Ann Pabst, who is staffing the door, womaning the door, letting folks in. And my guest, or our guest tonight, is Cheryl Dooley, who is the Associate Director of Financial Aid at Hamline University. And this is year number...
At Hamline?
Yeah.
23.
Year 23 at Hamline. And Cheryl and I worked together for about 20 years at Hamline, and almost 20, and before I came to the academy. And so she's a dear colleague and a fantastic financial aid officer. And I think she's a perfect representation of what you as families will find in financial aid offices across the country. A helpful, supportive person who can get you the facts and information pretty efficiently and quickly. And Cheryl, I would rate among the best I've ever worked with, and I've talked with hundreds of financial aid officers across the country. Before I turn it over to Cheryl, how many families here are from Visitation? Okay. And St. Thomas Academy. Great. And how many students are here? Raise your hand, students. Very good. Thank you for being here. And thank you, parents, for making students be here. I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl.
Thanks.
Good deal. As Steve said, this is the beginning of my 23rd year. So part of my time was in admissions, and now the rest of my time has been in financial aid. So hopefully we can get some of your questions answered from a wide variety of areas, but specifically on the scholarships and financial aid into things this evening. One more question that I do have is, can I get a show of hands of how many people are seniors or parents of seniors? Cool. And then juniors? And then sophomores? Awesome. Great. Good deal. I just wanted to start off by sharing with you that the presentation tonight is geared towards graduating seniors. So for those of you who are juniors and sophomores or under that, just kind of put yourself a year in advance as you're moving forward. So when you talk about deadlines and the 15, 16 FAFSA form and those kinds of things, you're always going to have to jump ahead another year and put yourself in that position. What I'd like to do this evening, though, is give you guys a general overview of what we're going to talk about here. We're going to talk about the goal of financial aid. We're going to talk about the FAFSA form, or that free application for federal student aid. We're going to talk about the different descriptions of financial aid programs. We're going to talk about timelines for those of you who are graduating seniors. We're also going to talk about payment options, some other benefits, and then some resources. So I think you guys have the PowerPoint slides in there, so hopefully you can jot some notes down as we move forward. As Steve mentioned before, I talk really fast, but I feel like we could be here for 2 days straight, nonstop, talking about financial aid kinds of things that you need to know. But I promise we're going to try and finish by 8 o'clock so you can get home and have a little bit of an evening after this. So the goal of financial aid is to assist students and their families by evaluating the family's ability to pay for education, taking a very limited pool of resources that are out there, distributing them in the fairest manner possible over an academic year. So it's a very big task that financial aid has in front of it. The key to completing financial aid is the FAFSA form, or that free application for federal student aid. So for those of you who are seniors, you're going to be looking for the 2015-2016 FAFSA. If you happen to go out to the FAFSA website tonight, you'll see that the 14-15 is still out there. You can certainly click on it and put some information in and go through it. Probably don't want to submit it at this time because perhaps it is that school is not looking at 14-15 data for you, but they're going to be looking for 15-16 data coming from you. The FAFSA form, we strongly encourage students and parents to do it electronically. There is a paper version to it, but the electronic version is much more easier to maneuver. There's less than 60 questions on there. It has skip logic built inside of it, so if you answer yes to a question, you might skip 6 other questions. So it kind of helps you navigate and move through it much more quickly. Once we encourage families to complete the FAFSA form, once your 2014 taxes are completed. Or if the colleges that you're applying to are asking you to apply by a certain deadline. Some schools may have a February 1st deadline, some may have a February 15th, some of them it might not be until the beginning of school, but we encourage families to, if you can, complete your 2014 taxes before you jump into doing the FAFSA. And the reasoning behind that is because a lot of the questions on the FAFSA are direct questions right off of lines on your 1040 or 1040A tax form, and it's much easier for you to answer those questions and move forward. Be sure that you're finding out on each college's website, whether it's admissions website or financial aid websites, if they have deadlines for applying for financial aid, because that's going to trigger when you're going to want to have your taxes completed and get your FAFSA completed. In addition to the FAFSA form, some colleges do ask you to provide supplemental forms that they, as an institution, will put together and send to you, or there is another program or a kind of a financial tool out there called the College Board Profile Form, and I'll have a link to that a little bit later on, but that is another form that some colleges do ask, especially colleges on the coastal areas. A couple schools in Minnesota, but it's much more predominant in the coastal areas for schools to ask for the profile form as well as a FAFSA form. Anytime after January 1st, your 15-16 FAFSA will be out there and be ready to complete. It is definitely not something you want to do on New Year's Day. I'm sure you can find other fun things to do on New Year's Day. And like I mentioned, try and work through and look to see if you complete your taxes before you jump into the FAFSA itself. What the FAFSA form is going to do is it calculates this one index or number at the end called an expected family contribution, or EFC. If one thing that you're going to walk away from tonight is we'll have a little quiz at the end about all the acronyms that I'm going to throw at you in this financial aid world that you're looking into. The expected family contribution generally is calculated by looking predominantly at parent and student adjusted gross income, parent and student asset information, the number of people in your family, and the number of people attending college in your family, and the age of the oldest parent. So when you're doing the FAFSA form, this is one of those times that you're not going to want to lie about your age. And the reasoning behind that is the closer you are to retirement age, the more of your assets and your income are being sheltered for retirement as opposed to put into the college funding. So it's okay to be truthful just this one time as you're moving forward with that FAFSA. The expected family contribution, or the index at the end, is a number that they spit out that a family can be reasonably expected to pay, but it might not be exactly what that college expectation is for you to pay. What the definition of need, what we do at the college is we take our total cost of attendance for attending an institution, we subtract out that expected family contribution, or that number that's kicked out of the FAFSA form, to come up with your family's financial need or financial eligibility. So this is how the financial aid award package is basically calculated and put together. Every university and college is going to have a different cost of attendance. I have yet to find one that has the exact same cost of attendance at Hamline. So that's why, one of the reasons why your financial aid packages are different at different schools is we all start with a different number at the top. The expected family contribution from the FAFSA is not going to change at any of the schools because it's the same data going to all the different schools that you're sharing it with. One thing that you can do this evening, if you are really gung-ho and want to get this show on the road, is you can go out to a college or university that your student has applied to and seek out their net price calculator on their website. Hopefully it's there and it's easy for you to find. It is supposed to be there. It's mandated by the federal government that we institutions have a net price calculator on our website. Some net price calculators are a little bit more in-depth than other net price calculators. But what it's designed to do is take the cost of attendance, subtract out your family's expected contribution from the information that you're providing on that website, and give you a general idea of what the cost is going to be like to attend that institution. On Hamline's website, if you head to our undergrad admissions homepage, it's one of the first things that pops up right there. The first questions that we ask are things like ACT scores and GPA, so we're going to tell you right away what a merit-based scholarship is based on those two parameters. But then if you go a few steps beyond that, you can say, I want to see an estimated financial aid award package. Answer a few more questions about adjusted gross income and those kinds of things, and it will spit out for you what a full estimated award is going to look like, from gift dollars to work study to loan eligibility. So it kind of gives you the bigger picture of what you're looking at. In addition to each college and university having a net price calculator, you can also determine your expected family contribution either on our State of Minnesota's website, which is the OHE or Office of Higher Ed.mn, or excuse me, .state.mn.us, or you can go to the federal government's website, which is FAFSA, the number 4, castor.ed.gov. So there's multiple sites out there that you can look at. So if you feel the need to go out and do something financial aid related this evening, those are the sites that you want to tap into to get a general idea of what you're expected from a family contribution perspective. The next thing we do at a college or university is look at that cost of attendance. And I just wanted to share with you how the universities put those numbers together. Some of the things are pretty obvious that we look at are tuition and fees, and that may vary from semester to semester or from class to class. We also incorporate room and board. We would look at a student living on campus, but we also provide living allowances for students who perhaps are residing off campus because we know they need to eat and sleep while attending school. We also look at things like books and supplies. We can look at things like transportation, personal expenses. Some institutions require additional equipment, perhaps in the form of a computer or a special computer, and that can all be incorporated into that school's cost of attendance. We will look at things like loan fees. We will also look at things like a study abroad fee. So if your student is perhaps studying away for a semester or for a year from that institution, and the costs may be a little bit higher associated with that, we can work that into a financial aid award package for families as well. There is a difference in the cost of attendance between what we consider direct costs versus indirect costs. And a direct cost is something you're going to see on that college billing statement. Tuition fees, if they live on campus, it'll be room and board. Some of us have a book rental program at our institution, so we list the book rental charge right up front on there. But other things are going to be indirect costs. Personal expenses, late night pizzas, laundry soap, those kinds of things are built inside of cost of attendance budget at a school. It's just not something that you'll see directly billed to you from that institution. But you would have financial aid to assist with some of those. Next, we're going to move right on into the FAFSA form itself. I like to take the FAFSA and kind of break it down into different components that you can kind of wrap your head around a little bit easier, because when you go up and look at it, it starts putting tabs and stuff up there. And if you just take it step by step, it's a little bit easier to understand. The very first thing that you're going to see when you enter into the FAFSA form is demographic information. And just keep in mind as parents, I know we are so gung-ho to help our students out because they're concentrating so hard on their academics in high school and doing all that fun stuff, that a lot of the times as parents, we're going to be the ones completing the FAFSA form for our student. But just keep in mind that anytime you see the word you, Y-O-U, it's referring to the student and not you as the parent, because this is the student's FAFSA form. So when you're listing social security number, name, date of birth, those kinds of things, it's really confusing sometimes to be in our own mindset and we start typing our own stuff in there, and that's not the case. You always want to put your student's information in where you see the word you or Y-O-U. You're going to need social security numbers, names, driver's license information, date of birth, all that kind of fun stuff from a demographic perspective. I would say a good probably 2/3 of the FAFSA itself is all demographic information and easy questions from the student and the questions surrounding the student. It's pretty straightforward stuff. One of the things that to keep in mind is that male students that are completing a FAFSA form must register with the Selective Service in order to receive federal and state funding. So if you have not yet turned 18 when you're completing the FAFSA, there is a question on there that says, when you turn 18, would you like the Department of Education to contact Selective Service, and if you check yes, they will notify the Selective Service and get you registered at the same time. The next section on there is schools that you can list. You can have 10 different spaces on the FAFSA form that you can put schools in. So hopefully by now your students have narrowed down their college selection process to 10 or under. If not, what will happen is you want to prioritize the schools, the top 10 schools that your student is looking at, put that information onto the FAFSA form, submit the FAFSA, let it go. Probably within those first couple of weeks when you're starting to get financial aid award packages back from schools, you can go back in, make a correction to the FAFSA, and add some of those additional institutions in there to make sure that all of the schools that your student has applied to get the FAFSA results as well. One thing, or the next thing, a big question that we get quite frequently, and I think we would all love to not have to do this, would be to not put the parents' information on the FAFSA so the student could receive additional financial assistance. But unfortunately, the federal government does not allow us to do that. A big question we get is, how can we as a family not, or as a student, not list my parents' information on the FAFSA form? If your student can answer yes to one of the items that you see up behind me here, if they're 24, if they're in a graduate or professional school, which you first have to get your undergraduate degree, if the student is married or separated, if they have legal dependents that they support more than 50% financially, if they're an orphan, ward of the court, emancipated minor, legal guardianship, or homeless, or if they're a veteran or currently serving in the military, that's the only way the students can not have to put their parents' information on the FAFSA form. If they have to, if they answer no to all the above, parents, you have to complete the FAFSA along with your student. If a student is residing with a grandparent, foster parent, or legal guardian who has not legally adopted them, then those individuals would not act as parents on the FAFSA form, and you'd probably want to call one of us in the financial aid world, and we can help you walk through that process at that point. Parents' information is the next kind of tab on the FAFSA form itself. Just like the students, you as parents will list your name, date of birth, social security number. The FAFSA form for all the parties involved on the FAFSA runs through the Department of Homeland Security, the Selective Service Administration, the Social Security Administration, and the IRS. So there's a lot of different kinds of associations and organizations flowing through the Department of Education. So if we're off by a digit on something, you're probably going to end up with a reject and have to go in and make that correction. So it's just important to really kind of fine tune that as you're going through and entering this information. A question that we get quite frequently is who, as from a parent's perspective, puts their information on the FAFSA form in perhaps a divorced or separated situation. So the easiest way to define some of this is how we have it listed out right here. If parents are married, biological or adoptive parents, then it's both parents' information that goes onto the FAFSA form under Parent 1 and Parent 2. We joke in the financial aid world, they switched, they used to have mother and father or stepmother and stepfather and stuff like this on here, and they switched it to Parent 1 and Parent 2, and we kind of think of Thing 1 and Thing 2 from Dr. Seuss as we're moving forward. The second category is parents that are not married but living together. Both of those parents, regardless of gender, have to put their information onto the student's FAFSA form. If parents are separated or divorced, it's the parent that the student has resided with the most in the past 12 months that the student would list on that FAFSA form. If there is an equal residence happening for that past 12 months, then it's the parent who has provided the most fiscal support to the student in that 12-month time span. If that parent is remarried, it's the parent and the step-parent's information that goes onto the FAFSA form for that student. The next thing that they ask is the number of people in your family and the number of people attending college in your household. So if you have more than one student attending college, you're going to do more than one FAFSA. Aren't you lucky? It should be relatively easy because you do FAFSA for student 1. And then at the end of the FAFSA form, when you get your confirmation page, they'll say, do you have another sibling or brother or sister that's also going to be attending college next year? Would your parent like to transfer their data and start a FAFSA for them? So you should be able to just click on that tab. All of the parental information will transfer over. So all you need to do is add the student's information for the second student in your household. If you are a parent and happen to also be attending college at the same time your student is, you cannot list yourself as a person attending college on your student's FAFSA, but you would want to do your own FAFSA and file as an independent student with dependents. The next piece of information is fiscal information. This is where you're asking for not only the parent, but also the student's information on the FAFSA form. It is color-coded, so when you get in there, it should be hopefully easy to define. You're always using prior fiscal information or year data for the current FAFSA. So for the 15-16 FAFSA, you're going to be using your 2014 tax information. Once again, as I mentioned, most likely you're going to be completing this sometime in the month of February or the early part of March, once you've had a chance to get your taxes completed. If you're one of those folks who likes to do their taxes on April 15th, right at the deadline, the only thing that I'd encourage you to do this year is see if you can't complete them a little bit earlier to get information, and accurate information to put onto the FAFSA form. It doesn't mean you have to file your federal taxes, but if you could just do it earlier so you can provide that information on the FAFSA, your student will be able to get their financial aid or package a little bit earlier and sooner, so you can make those final decisions on where you're looking at college. The FAFSA tool, for the third year in a row, has provided an option for families that if you have completed your taxes electronically, you wait about 2 weeks, you can use the IRS data retrieval tool inside the FAFSA to actually go to the IRS, pull your 2014 fiscal information and plop it right into the FAFSA so you don't have to worry about keying in any data. It's a really handy dandy little tool, but because it's a federal government product, there are a few little snags that you need to be aware of. If you file electronically, it's usually available within 2 weeks, and then you can do your FAFSA form. If you file via paper, it takes about 6 weeks. This tool will, fingers crossed, hopefully be available on February 1st of 2015. But because our Congress is kind of taking their time and making some decisions lately, they're kind of holding up some tax questions that the IRS needs in order to be prepared for tax filing for all of us for our 2014 taxes, so it may delay this processing just slightly. But that doesn't mean you can't use the information right off your taxes and key all the data in as well. If your student happens to be selected for verification on their FAFSA form, don't panic. Those of us in the financial aid world will be back in touch with you, giving you instructions on what we need from you. You do need to either be able to access that data retrieval tool or provide a copy of a tax return transcript, which is something that the IRS would need to provide to you after you filed your taxes. Because the IRS data retrieval tool is pretty handy for a lot of folks, there are a couple of caveats that you need to be aware of. It's not going to work for families that have had a parental marital status change after December 31st of 2014. It's not going to work if you are married filing taxes separately, if you file head of household, if you have to file an amended tax return, or if you file a foreign tax return. So those are just some of the caveats that you need to be aware of. Another big component on the FAFSA is looking at asset information. So we're going to ask you to report your cash, savings, and checking, and that's going to be as of the date that you're filing the FAFSA form. So not the average for the month, or if you happen to do it on payday and it's already in your account, you want to make sure that you're just doing it on whatever day you're filing the FAFSA, what's in your cash, savings, and checking at that point in time. And it's both for parent and student. Generally, the student's assets are assessed at a higher rate than a parent's asset would be on the FAFSA form. Usually right around 20% of the student's assets are assessed on an annual basis, and probably only about 12% of a parent's assets. One of the things that I find quite interesting on the FAFSA form is, in my world, things like my retirement accounts and the value of my home and things like that I would consider an asset. But when you're completing the FAFSA, some of those things you do not list as assets on the FAFSA form. So you must report things like 529 college savings plans, Coverdell accounts. You have to report mutual funds, CDs, trust funds, money markets, stocks. You have to report real estate that you don't homestead. So if you have rental properties or a lake home, you have to list those. But you're also only listing the net worth of all of those as investments. So you're taking the value minus the debt and listing the net worth on the FAFSA form. Doing it as the value of the date that you're filing the FAFSA. What you don't want to report on the FAFSA form is the value of the home that you're living in. You don't want to report the value of your life insurance policies. You do not want to report the value of your designated retirement accounts. And the definition, I think, from the federal government's perspective of designated retirement accounts, it's the ones that when you pull them out, you have like a penalty or you have that age differential in there where you have to reach a certain age before you can start withdrawing. Some of us may have resources set aside, mutual fund CDs, that's like, yep, that's my retirement fund. That's what I'm going to travel with later on in life. Those are not designated retirement accounts. As far as the federal government is concerned, it's the ones that are the 401ks, those kinds of things that the federal government is leaning toward. If your family owns a family farm and you're homesteading that farm, that does not get reported onto the FAFSA. If you own a family business and you have 100 or fewer full-time employees, the value of that business also does not get reported on the FAFSA. Component number 6 is signing and submitting the FAFSA. So another piece of homework for tonight for all of you is to go home and apply for a FAFSA PIN. You can do that at pin.ed.gov. And most of you are going to need 2 of them in your household. The student is going to need their PIN, and at least one parent will need a PIN. One thing that you don't want to do is share this PIN with anyone. This is your electronic signature with the Department of Ed at the federal government. So this is something that's really important. Put it in a safe place, but if you're like me, I really stick it in a safe place. So really when I want to pull this sucker out and use it again, I've totally lost where I've stuck it. You can go back to this website and say, forgot my PIN, and they will ask you a couple of challenge questions that you're going to ready put in, and it will display right there in real time for you what that PIN was that you put in there. The PIN is used for signing your FAFSA. It's used for making corrections to your FAFSA. It's used for signing federal loans as you're getting through this financial aid process and if you plan to borrow in that. But it's also used to look up the history on those loans that either the student or the parent has borrowed. As of April 25th of 2015, the PIN itself is going to change to what we call an FSA ID, or Federal Student Aid ID number. I think this is just the federal government's way of saying that they still have some skin in the game with all of us in the financial aid world, because not a lot of other things have changed this year, but they had to do something to change everything and make our lives a little bit more crazy. You have to do a PIN right now because you guys are still going to file the FAFSA, fingers crossed, hopefully before April 15th. Then on April 15th, magically, when you go in and try and use your PIN, it will ask you to create an FSA user ID. So it shouldn't be a big deal. They've guaranteed us that it's going to be a smooth transition, but initially you guys need to apply for a PIN. I wanted to throw that in there about the FSA ID, so I didn't want you to panic when after April 15th you go in and all of a sudden the PIN is making you change it to something different. If you have more than one student in your household, you're going to need more than one student PIN. So each student has to have their own PIN, but the parent only needs one PIN for themselves. Both parents can get a PIN, that's totally okay, but only one parent is required to sign a FAFSA. The last component of the FAFSA is called the confirmation section. So you have all of your data in there, you're going to put your PINs in, you're going to agree that all this information is accurate to the best of your ability, and you're going to submit the FAFSA. Pretty much instantaneously, right when that happens, you're going to get a small confirmation page giving you the thumbs up and you're good to go. But usually within about a 2-day time span, you're also going to receive via email something called a student aid report. This is the results of your FAFSA form. I would strongly encourage families to just look through it, make sure that all the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted. If you're actually keyed in your fiscal information, you want to make sure that all that data is correct, because there's a big difference if your income was $75,000 and you actually accidentally added an extra 0 at the end of that and it became $750,000. A little bit of difference in financial aid award packages, and we would not necessarily know that in the financial aid world, so make sure you're just checking that to be accurate. About 30% of the FAFSA filing population is at random selected for a process called verification, where we as an institution will come back out to you and say, we just need to verify and clarify that the information you listed on the FAFSA is accurate to the best of our ability. It'll probably be another small form. It may mean confirming tax information with the IRS, those kinds of things, but we would certainly help walk you through that process. Just because you've completed the FAFSA form one time, you do get a gold star for that. but you can get a gold star every year because you have to do this process over for every year that your student is attending school until they graduate from their undergraduate degree. And if they continue or decide to pursue something at the professional level, then this is on them at that point in time. Parents are off the hook. Because the federal government form, when you look at it, is pretty much black and white, you answer this question just like it states right in there, but we all know in the financial aid world that our lives are not black and white. There's a lot of gray involved in what we do, and especially in our fiscal lives. A lot of colleges and universities have special circumstance forms for families that are dealing with things that are unusual on a yearly basis. For instance, maybe it is that you've had an employment change where there's been a decrease in income in some way, shape, or form, or loss of a job. There have been medical and dental expenses above and beyond what insurance is covering in your family's scenario. Or perhaps there's a parent enrolled in school at the same time. Those kinds of things that are special or different are considered special circumstances, and you must contact the institutions that your student is applying to find out how and if they will take those things into consideration. At Hamlin, those three things that I just mentioned, we also look at things like private school tuition for siblings that are still enrolled in school, one-time income adjustments, and those kinds of things that can happen. So there's a lot of different things out there, but you definitely want to contact the schools that your student is applying to find out how you can relay that information to the financial aid offices that your student is interested in, those schools that they're interested in attending. What is financial aid? Back in the day, I used to think that financial aid was two things. That was the grants and scholarships, the free stuff, the stuff that you didn't pay back at the end. Those of us in the financial aid world, as well as the federal and state governments, look at financial aid as four different components: the grants, the scholarships, things you do not repay, but we also look at it as loans and work study opportunities. So there are four different keys or things that you may see on your financial aid award package. We'll start with the gift resources. Probably the biggest contributor to a student's financial aid award package is going to be the institution or college that your student is applying to. The institution may have additional or supplemental forms that they're going to ask you to complete in the financial aid world, so be sure that you're checking on that admissions or financial aid homepage to find out if there's more than just the FAFSA that's needed to access institutional dollars. The state of Minnesota also has a state grant program, so when you complete the FAFSA form, and you have it sent to the schools in the state of Minnesota that you are interested in attending, because you're a Minnesota high school graduate, we are automatically calculating potential state grant eligibility for you at the schools in Minnesota. So the state grant is not something that you can take with you out of state, but if you attend a Minnesota institution and you've graduated from Minnesota high school, we will automatically check to see if you guys have some state grant eligibility. There are more grant programs in the state of Minnesota and through our state at the website at ohe.state.mn.un or US, and I would encourage families to go out there and look at it. It's a really great site to help you navigate your way through financial aid. I think one of the brochures that you had as you came in also was from our state of Minnesota. They do a really good job of putting things together and kind of laying it out for you. Underneath the federal category of grants, the Pell Grant is probably the most popular program that most people have heard about. The numbers that you see listed up here are the actual numbers for the 14-15 academic year that we're working in right now. One thing that I'd like to share with you, though, is the Pell Grants are predominantly awarded to families that usually have incomes below $50,000. It is not something that a lot of us see in the financial, when we're completing a FAFSA form. Don't panic. The student aid report will tell you right off the bat if you have Pell Grant eligibility or not. It is only one of many programs for gift assistance that you may have eligibility for, but I just kind of wanted to put some perspective on that Pell Grant program. There are also SEOG grants, Iraqi and Afghanistan service grants, as well as a TEACH grant under the federal government. One thing that I'd like to point out about the TEACH grant, it is a grant for students that are interested in education. However, it's kind of a unique grant in the sense that if you don't fulfill all the obligations associated with the TEACH grant program, meaning teaching in a high-need field in certain school districts throughout the United States within an 8-year time after you graduate, and you have to teach for a certain number of years, the grant turns back into a loan and must be repaid at that point in time. So it's a little bit of a different grant in my world, but they still consider it a grant at that juncture. Moving on into scholarships, Scholarships are generally things that the student has achieved either from a merit or an academic, fine arts, athletic, some sort of a talent that they have. These are the things that generally do not have the financial need associated with them. Usually it's based on some sort of a talent or an academic perspective. Institutions and colleges are usually your best resource for a lot of those, so be checking out those scholarship deadlines right now. A lot of schools have deadlines coming up here in the next month or so. Here in your local community, check out the high school, check out the city that you live in, check out all the organizations and activities that you participate in. One thing, I think it sounds really silly, and I know that you all don't have a chance to do this very often, but sitting around the kitchen table for 5-10 minutes and kind of making a list of all the different organizations and activities your family may participate in, and contacting those to see if they have some scholarship dollars for the student or for dependents of the parents. So that might be another way to search out some scholarship resources for students. National scholarship searches, places like fastweb.com, are a really great tool to do a free online search to help you find scholarships. Fastweb.com basically goes in and asks you to put in demographic information about yourself, your majors, your interest areas, organizations that you participate in, and it will automatically start searching. You will probably get 5 to 6 emails a day from fastweb.com saying, oh, we found this one, oh, we found that one. It's a great way to kind of help you do some searching. It doesn't mean that you have to apply for all of them. It just is helping you narrow down that search to find ones that you may be interested in applying to. Parents' place of employment is another great place to look. A lot of us started working a long time ago at our employer and maybe forgot about some of those human resource options and benefits that are there. Be sure and ask the question. Students' place of employment is becoming very popular. Students are working. Check it out. Doesn't hurt to ask the question. You never know when you're going to get another $500 to $1,000. All those little ones add up to the big bucks in the long run. Keep in mind that those deadlines for a lot of places are coming up. One good thing that I encourage students to do is when you're applying to colleges, ask that college or university how they're going to use that outside scholarship that you're bringing with you to that institution. Say you get a $2,000 scholarship from the local Lions organization. What's going to happen with that $2,000 when you bring it to Hamlin? Will the university just simply reduce work study or loan eligibility, or will they reduce gift money that they've already given you? It's always a good thing to know before you're going in how those scholarships are going to be affected. Fingers crossed, hopefully most universities will either reduce loan eligibility or work study and never touch any of the gift money that they've already awarded you, because then it's just less that you have to work or less that you have to borrow to help finance your education. It's estimated that 1 in every 8 students receives some sort of a private scholarship, so it's definitely worth searching and seeking out. But keep in mind, please don't pay anybody to do a scholarship search for you or to apply for a scholarship in the sense like, oh, we'll give you, if you give us $25, we'll do this wonderful search for you. Keep the $25 in your pocket. There are free search tools out there in a lot of different places that will do this for you for free. Please, if you don't remember anything tonight but this following thing, I will be more than happy. Please do not go to FAFSA.com. FAFSA.com is going to charge you, I think it's up to $89 or something like that, to file your FAFSA. The first word in FAFSA is free. Free application for federal student aid. You want to go to FAFSA.gov. This is a federal government form. So don't pay to do this. I would be more than happy to help you through the process if you get stuck someplace, but just don't pay anybody to file the FAFSA form for you. Because out there's lots of places that will try and scam students. There is a website set up by the federal government for scholarship scams that you can certainly tap into if you think that one of them is not legit. I know that your guidance offices here are very good resources for you, not only in helping you locate scholarships, but then also if you have some questions, because it just doesn't seem like it's right, ask them that question. They can contact us and we can certainly do some research for you in that regard as well. The next component is what we consider self-help, or we're looking at the loans. Sometimes loans are a 4-letter word, bad word that starts with an L, I understand that. But it is a way for students to finance their education. We always encourage students to look at all other resources in the gift world before you're starting to tap into loans. Loans are something, obviously, you have to pay back when you're done with school, usually requiring additional applications beyond the FAFSA form in order to obtain a loan. The order that you see them listed here is kind of how we encourage students to tap into resources if you need to borrow. The Federal Perkins loan is what we consider a subsidized loan, meaning the federal government is paying the interest on this loan while the student is in school. You have a 9-month grace period when you're done with school before you go into repayment, and then at that point in time, the interest kicks in and it sits at 5%. The Federal Direct Loan Program is also a loan in the student's name. There are 2 different types of direct loans. One is a subsidized loan. Once again, the federal government is subsidizing the interest or paying the interest for you while you're in school. They have a 6-month grace period when you're done with school before you go into repayment, when the interest would kick in. For this current academic year, the interest rate would then be 4.66%. The unsubsidized loan, once again, in the student's name, is where the interest does accrue while the student is in school. The interest nor the principal need to be repaid until 6 months after the student is done with their degree, and that interest is also at 4.66%. What kind of a loan you're going to receive is dependent upon the results of the FAFSA form. So the FAFSA is the key to getting access to these loans as you're applying for college. The institution will determine how much of each loan, or if any, if you have that eligibility. You will always have unsubsidized loan eligibility. It's whether or not you have the subsidized or the Perkins eligibility that the FAFSA will determine. As a first-year student, you have $5,500 worth of eligibility. As a sophomore, you'll move up to $6,500. As a junior, it'll be $7,500, and as a senior, it will be $7,500. Because these loans do not require credit checks, they're in the student's name. Back in the day, they were called guaranteed student loans or Stafford loans for some of you who are like me back in the day. Now the federal government is the borrower, however. It is not in the banking industry, so it's all brought back in-house. The Department of Ed will be the servicer and the borrower on those. The next loan category you see is called the SELF loan. This loan is through the state of Minnesota. For any student attending college or university in the state of Minnesota would have SELF loan access. It is considered what we call a private or alternative loan. It does require a student to have a creditworthy cosigner that jumps on board with them. There is a variable or a fixed rate. These are the current rates that are up there. I think I checked as of last week. These were the rates that were listed. It does have a maximum cap on it. And the school would help you determine the amount of the loan up to that cap if you have that eligibility. Other alternative or private loans happen in the banking industry. Some of the popular lenders are Banks of North Dakota, Sallie Mae, Wells Fargo, Citibank, First Marblehead. There's a whole bunch of them out there. Lots of federal credit unions borrow loans to students. This is where it does go through a credit check for a student. They usually require a creditworthy cosigner. It's not because the student has bad credit, it's because the student just doesn't have a credit history and they need someone with some collateral on there to help that student. The interest rates can be variable or they can be fixed. Each of the lenders have their own sets of criteria that they will look at. Most of the time, a college or university will provide, hopefully, a lender list for you to look at those options. And last but not least, because the federal government doesn't want to leave you guys out as parents, they have a loan for you too. It's called the Federal Plus Loan, or we used to call it Parent Loan for undergraduate students. That option is available. It is at a set fixed rate. It does go through a credit check process. The Federal Plus Loan and alternative loans are usually the eligibility goes all the way up to the cost of attendance minus any other financial aid that the student is using. So you do have access and means to apply and to cover all of the costs at college based on those 4 programs that I mentioned: scholarships, grants, loans, and work study. The last category in self-help aid is student employment. A lot of it's work study. That's a pretty popular term. Lots of different funding sources. Some of those resources come from the federal government, the state government, or the institution. Whether or not work study is a guaranteed position on a college campus depends on the institution. Some schools will assign you a job. Some schools will say, oh, you need to seek out a job on our campus. Here are the resources and the webpage to do so. I find that a lot of students in maybe I shouldn't say enjoy working. They appreciate the opportunity to work, to earn some money while they're in school, to help pay some of their other expenses and or their tuition as they're in school. A lot of colleges and universities will pay the student direct or give the student the option to pay down their student account as their work study checks come through. So lots of different options with that. Now that you guys have your financial aid award package in hand, kind of thinking about some timelines as we're moving forward here, you're going to apply to be admitted to a school. You have to be admitted to an institution before we in the financial aid office can provide you with a financial aid award package. So you need to have gone through the application, be admitted, most likely find out about scholarship opportunities, and then the financial aid award package will follow that. Most of you know for who are seniors who have started applications already, right? Yes, yes. If you haven't, you need to see the counseling staff in the back of the room when this program is over. For those of you who are juniors and sophomores, I would strongly encourage you to be seeking out some colleges and universities that you're interested in. Doesn't hurt to go visit, do those kinds of things. Obviously, that application process will probably start for you in the summer before your senior year and definitely in the fall of your senior year. But for those of you who are seniors, that's a must to have that be either done or pursuing right now. Also researching and applying for scholarships. Lots of colleges and universities have scholarship deadlines coming up here probably within the next 30 days or so. You definitely want to be aware of those. Once you miss these opportunities, there usually is not an option to go back as a sophomore, junior, or senior to access these new incoming first-year student scholarships. So please don't miss those options. Check out those websites. Make sure that you have all of those written down so you know when those deadlines are coming up. You can complete your FAFSA anytime after January 1st. Remember that we want to try and get our taxes done for 2014 first, unless the college has a drop-dead deadline that they're asking you to complete the FAFSA by. And then you can always go in and update that FAFSA with your actual tax information once you have that completed. Don't forget, some colleges and universities will ask you to provide supplemental forms beyond the FAFSA form, so be sure that you're checking out those websites if needed. FAFSA processing takes about 2 days, and then you're going to get that student aid report result coming back to your email account. Make sure that you're reviewing that. But keep in mind, once the FAFSA comes back, it usually takes about 10 to 14 days before those of us in the financial aid world get access to that. So just because you have it in 2 days doesn't mean that we have access to it in 2 days. I know we would like to speed that process up for you as quickly as possible, but the federal government's a little slower when colleges get that access. Most colleges and universities will start awarding financial aid award packages, I would say probably early to mid-March is usually always our goal to start going out the door with those. So you can kind of see your timeline progress. If you get your FAFSA done February, early part of March, hopefully that school or those schools will have something back to you by the end of March, early April. So that when that May 1st national reply deadline rolls around for college decision, you'll have all the pieces of the puzzle at your fingertips and you can put it all together to make that final decision about where you're interested in attending school. When you get all your financial aid award packages and you lay them out right in front of you, please make sure you're doing an apples to apples comparison. And what I mean by that is make sure that you're finding the direct costs at each of the institutions that your student is looking at, taking the gift and scholarship dollars and subtracting that from there. Then maybe, if need be, looking at loan opportunities, but you're doing the same thing for each of the schools. Make sure that you're looking at those direct costs and seeking out what those direct costs are up front. Some of them hopefully are not hidden, but some of them may have some surprises a little later on. Some of them you may be paying by credit for the school you're attending. Some of them have what we call flat tuition. If you register anything between 12 and 20 credits, you pay the same flat rate. So just make sure you're inquiring and trying to figure out what that cost is, and then subtracting your financial aid and working down. Now that you have your financial aid award package in your hand, and you figured out what the costs were going to be, and you subtracted off all the gift money from there, and you still have a $5,000 balance left over without looking at loans. You can tap into some loan resources if you choose, or maybe it is that your family has been saving for college, you as a student have been working in the summer or during school and have some savings that you're putting towards. Maybe you're looking at graduation resources to help pay for school. Make sure that when you're looking at paying out of pocket in some form of cash, that you're also checking out what college's payment plans are. Because in addition to financial aid, a lot of schools have payment plans that may be beneficial to your family in the long run. Some schools have an installment plan where they take the fall semester and they divide it by 5. You start paying on August 1st and pay through December 1st in 5 equal installments without any interest charge. So maybe they do the same thing again for spring, then pay January through May in 5 equal installments for whatever the spring semester is. Maybe some of them have a 12-month plan. Most schools are going to have a semester plan where you pay at the beginning of each term the lump that you owe for fall and the lump that you owe again for spring, perhaps in January. Some schools have things called guaranteed cost plans where they will share with you that if you lock into this particular program by paying X number of dollars up front, we will guarantee that your tuition will not increase X percent over the time span that your student is here at school. Just be sure that you're asking those institutions that your student is looking at if they have payment plans above and beyond financial aid that you can look at and access, because it might end up saving you more money in the long run. Or at least making it easier to make payments, especially if it's on an installment plan. Sometimes it's easier to pay $2,000 a month than to cough up $10,000 at the beginning of each semester or something like that. Some other benefits that I want you guys to consider beyond this. So now jump ahead for a whole nother year, and your student has already completed their fall semester of their freshman year in school, and now you're going to be doing your 2015 taxes. Keep in mind that there are tax credits for educational tax benefits that you need to be aware of when you're completing your taxes. So if you've paid some college tuition, make sure you're tapping in and checking those out. In the future, if you've borrowed loans and you're paying interest on those loans, that's another deduction that you can take advantage of on your taxes. Employer-paid tuition assistance, military service educational benefits, tuition reciprocity with other surrounding states. We have another second ring of states that Minnesota has reciprocity with at specific institutions and sometimes in Canada. So make sure you're checking out all these options and taking advantage of how to save money as you're looking at schools. Some popular websites that you guys need to be aware of. FAFSA.gov is the website you want to go to, not FAFSA.com. Tonight, you guys can go home and apply for your FAFSA PINs by going to pin.ed.gov. Remember, you need at least 2 in your household, 1 for the student and 1 for a parent. The FAFSA forecaster.ed.gov is the website if you want to figure out what your expected family contribution is, as well as those net price calculators on those college websites. Studentaid.ed.gov is the U.S. Department of Education's website for financial aid. Lots of good information out there. This website also really addresses, and I know this is really jumping ahead, but sometimes we want to think about this now, loan forgiveness programs. If you're in public service, education, some of those other fields, some really good information on loan public service forgiveness. OHE.state.mn.us is our Minnesota Department of Education's website. Really great opportunities and information there for those of us who are Minnesota residents. Fastweb.com is a free online scholarship search. Finaid.org is a website that's been put together by some former financial aid directors that really gives you kind of the English version of financial aid. They also have some, this is going to sound really geeky, and yes, you can call me a financial aid geek, I understand that, but they have some really interesting calculators on there for like if you'd borrow X number of dollars in loans, what's repayment going to look like on the back end after 10 years of repayment. They have some really good information on there about if you're interested in focusing in on this kind of career, this is the average salary, this is what your average income would be, how you're going to pay your loans back at that. So there's some really interesting stuff out there in the long run. The CSScollegeboard.org is the profile application, so this may be a supplemental form that some of the colleges and universities are asking you to complete in addition to that FAFSA form itself. And last, this is me. And I would certainly welcome questions that you guys have over the course of these next couple of years that you are in applying for colleges, for those of you who are younger or those of you who are going to do a FAFSA here in the next couple of months. The only thing that I'm going to ask you to do is when you call me or send me an email is that you right away tell me at the beginning of that phone call that you saw me here tonight. It will save you the 10-minute spiel about how Hamlin is so cool, even if you're not applying to Hamlin. So I would certainly welcome those questions. What I think we're going to do, I know it's 8 o'clock. What I think I'll do is I'll answer a few questions right now as a bigger group, but I will certainly hang out for a few minutes too if somebody has more one-on-one questions that they would like to ask.
What is the selective service?
Registering for the selective service is I wouldn't call it a draft, but if there would ever one be implemented, all male student or males over the age of 18, I think it's 18 to 26, need to be registered with the selective service for that. Sorry.
Does this process take into account any funds that a grandparent has put together?
The question was, is this process take into account any funding like a grandparent or aunt or uncle or someone outside of your immediate family may have set aside for the student? On the FAFSA form itself, the answer would be no for this first year. However, if a grandparent had a 529 college savings plan set up for the student and you utilized some of that 529 college savings plan for the student's first year in school, you have to report that as money paid on behalf of the student in their sophomore year's FAFSA. Does that make sense? So not the first year,
Right.
but any money that the student would have benefited from their first year in school needs to be reported on the next year's FAFSA as untaxed money received.
What if it's a bank account that you're set up for their line, would you recommend that they keep it in their name versus giving it to the?
As in the grandparent's name? Yep, so you're only reporting income and asset information in the family, in the household that the student is residing in on the FAFSA. You had a question?
Just any comment, if the student's intending to pursue ROTC, how that might affect many of the things that you presented this evening?
Yep. It shouldn't have an effect because financial aid should be something separate. ROTC, however, has really wonderful scholarship programs for students, and you definitely want to connect with the recruiter that they've been working with to find out and how to access those when they're in school. I know that there are some stipulations as far as like credits and what schools the students may attend, those kinds of things, but the students should still go through and complete the financial aid process along with that.
You said something about fine arts scholarships. How does that connect to financial aid?
Yep. The question was about fine arts scholarships. I would consider those, you definitely want to be seeking out those types of scholarships at all the colleges and universities that a student would be applying to. Same thing within your local community, doing a national search on specific fine arts areas that you're interested in. All of those would be considered like an outside scholarship and could be added to your financial aid package. Hopefully they would reduce loans and work study eligibility that you would have. Because you would be working less or paying less in loans back in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for doing a great job.
Oh, thank you. Cool. I'll hang out here for a few minutes after if somebody has individual questions.
Okay, we could thank Cheryl for her time. And just one last thing, you all picked up this booklet as you came in. This is published by the state of Minnesota's Office of Higher Education. And it's a really great financial aid piece. It walks you through the whole process. It's tabbed on the edges. It's indexed. It's super clear. It's a really wonderful piece. Take the time to read it. It's not overwhelming. It's really a wonderful piece to help you understand as students and parents the financial aid process. Thanks a lot. Thanks for being here. I can answer questions. Ms. Gutierrez, Ken, Larry Bartek, Ken, and Pabst. So if you've got questions.